Hello, I'm Christopher Jerome Carter. From time to time, the Journal of Analytical Psychology publishes interviews with eminent analysts who contribute to the development of analytical psychology. Andrew Samuels has graciously accepted an interview that addresses material from his latest book, reflecting critically on the political psyche, therapy, testament, and trouble in psychoanalysis and Jungian analysis, which was recently published this year, and his presentation at the JAP conference in April last year, which convened at the University of Essex. A recording of Andrew's presentation is currently posted at the JAP website, along with other presentations from that conference. Andrew Samuels has been a sort of in-house rebel in the field of Jungian analysis and in therapy for over 40 years. He has spearheaded campaigns calling for action and connection with Jung's anti-Semitism and Jung's attitude towards Africans. Andrew's work linking therapy and thinking and politics is internationally recognized. In the UK, he co-founded the Jungian analysis, he co-founded the Jungian Analysis and Activism. It's always a mouthful for me. And psychotherapists and counselors for social responsibility. He was one of the two professors that initiated the programs in Jungian and post-Jungian studies at the University of Essex. Andrew works as a consultant to politicians and political parties and to Britain's National Health Service. Andrew has written many books that have been translated into 21 languages, amongst them Jung and the Post-Jungians and the Political Psyche. His most recent book is reflecting critically on the political psyche, therapy, testament, and trouble in psychoanalysis and Jungian analysis. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi. Hi, Christopher.
Andrew, for over 20 years, you've been actively involved in political activism. You have written on gender politics, ethnic bias, in particular anti-Semitism, and you were one who initiated the open letter on Jung and Africans, which was published in the British Journal of Psychotherapy in 2018, which was signed by 35 notable individuals from Jungian communities, although it was not a petition. It continues to have some buzz, both in support and in less than supportive attitudes. You played a major role in criticizing Jung and criticizing his racism, I should say, in particular, and you have not slowed with the formation of analysis and activism. Before your presentation at the Journal of Analytical Psychology conference last year, Arthur Nieser introduced you as someone who does not shy away from controversy. I'm interested, where does the motivation for your long-standing display of courage and advocacy come from? Like, how do you do it? Where does it come from?
Well, let me begin with the difficult bits. I didn't like my parents. I didn't like my family. I didn't like the community in which I grew up. A great deal of that dislike is displaced onto contemporary political themes and issues. You could call it the shadow of activism. I'm not the only person involved in politics with a chip on their shoulder. That's the most difficult bit. Perhaps I can deepen that by saying that I have always occupied in the family, at school, at college, in the profession, the role of the rebel or even the naughty boy. In the Jewish Passover Seder ceremony, there are these four sons, and one is called the Rosha, the wicked son, who says, "What the fuck has this got to do with me?" And when the family held its Seder, somebody always said, "That's Andrew." So that's the very personal and difficult stuff. There's personal stuff that is not so difficult. Why do I write about the dry father? A really nice man, nothing wrong with him, who lacks a certain kind of animation, of energy. That's my dad. I think it's very important that people who theorize bring in the personal antecedents. Jung called it the personal confession, but I'm not sure that's the right phrase, because confession implies you've done something wrong. Whereas
Hmm.
I think understanding why you write what you do, why you hate and love what you hate and love, understanding the personal side is not a confession, for God's sake. It's just part of what a person should do. You use the word courage. Actually, not much of what I've done involves courage. When I was a young man, a teenager, I went to South Africa and I ended up in prison. I was working for the African National Congress. That was scary. That was really scary. I was 17. Was that courage? I'm not sure. Mostly, though, mostly, and I'm speaking to you as a man of color, mostly my role is that of an ally. My life is fine. I'm a very privileged person, well educated, well off, white, Jewish, which in our world is not such a handicap as it might be in other worlds, and heterosexual, a trading analyst. I mean, being a heterosexual trading analyst is extremely important if you want to be an ally. For example, back in the 90s, when I was leading the campaign to stop discrimination against gay men and lesbians from training, I was the co-lead. The other one was an out lesbian who had written a book on lesbianism and psychoanalysis. I was the straight guy. Being an ally is not the same as being part of an oppressed group. It simply is not. And I think it has to be said again and again. If you go on the internet, there's a lot of very interesting stuff on allyship. But one of the things you will read is learn when to step back. Learn when you have to accept this isn't exactly my personal struggle. So let the people whose personal struggle it is take over. And this is going on very much at the moment in relation to trans. As soon as, if you imagine a vicious debate about trans, which goes on in Jungian circles, as soon as trans voices are allowed in, my voice should zip, stumm, because
Hmm.
I'm only an ally. So be careful when you think of me as courageous. I'm a very privileged guy. I'm a very skilled ally. You're better off with me on your side than against you, but it isn't directly my struggle. Now, you may have noticed what I haven't talked about is principle, idealism, ethics, Eric Neumann, new ethic, and all this. I don't think that's really where I come from. It's not a very deep thing for me. It's just a very natural thing to be the bad boy and to fight other people's battles for them, with them, until such time as they take over the baton. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Reading your speech from Crossing Borders at the conference, it's clear that you seek to embolden analysts to enter political discussions, to express their political views without dread of misstepping, without the dread of failure. Currently, there are many unions who consider political explorations and analytical theory to be something like an intrusive, unwelcome blight in the field. They may argue that analytical borders need not be crossed with other fields of interest, perhaps with the exception of spirituality. What do you see as major factors motivating such a position towards politics in our field? A position that disapproves of what some would call a politicization of analytical theory?
I
What are the
have a lot,
motivations?
I have a lot of respect for people who don't care for what I do and what I write. It's really important. Not all psychoanalysis is about politics. And I'm very scared that some practitioners, maybe people I've even influenced, are pushing the client, the patient, and the material in a political direction where it really shouldn't go. That said, we are only at the beginning. Jung was always it was always inclined to say that depth psychology is only at the beginning. Well, it is. But the political turn, as I call it, the political turn in the psychotherapies is really only beginning. Let's be precise and definitional here. We could be talking about how you work politically in a session with a person whose problems seem to stem from their socio-political subject position. And we are talking about that. We could be talking about the application of depth psychological Jungian principles and ideas and theories to political problematics. There's a lot of that going on. Donald Trump is the recipient of a great deal of this sort of thing. We could be talking about political actions carried out by groups of analysts and therapists, which is very, very important as well. So all these things need to be distinguished. I wrote a paper and gave it at a conference about 20 years ago, in which the title of the paper was 7 Types of Politics in the Depth Psychological Field, which is a bit of a steal from Empson's 7 Types of Irony. He wrote a book about it in literary criticism. So it's important to chop this up a little bit. Some of us are very good at one thing, but terrible at another. I'm not very good at applying Jungian and post-Jungian ideas to political problematics. I am very good at getting people together to do something. There are other people, I'm not going to mention names, but people can figure out who I might mean, who are extraordinarily committed to understanding the political world using the received wisdom of classical Jungian theory. But when it comes to doing something, they're nowhere to be found. You know, they're on a holiday or they're in their second or third house. These are often quite well-off people who are absolutely brilliant at applying the ideas, but when it comes to getting out there and doing something, they're less good. In terms of organizing, the profession is very difficult at organizing itself, even as a profession. So it's not surprising that when we try to do something in the political area, we fuck it up totally. We're not good at it. We're not. That's why I say, don't do this on your own. If you have an interest in linking depth psychology, Jungian ideas to politics, find people outside the Jungian field to play with. They may not want to play with you. And we'll be talking about Jung and anti-Semitism later, and Jung and race. Think about it. If you want to work with people who are active already in the political field, you better have a good response ready when they say, well, why on earth would I sup with a Jungian?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a long answer to a very challenging question. But as you'll see from my answer, and it's there in all my work, I like the principle of complementarity of Niels Bohr. You know, the more you know about one thing, the less you'll know about another related thing. So the more you know about how to organize, the less good you are about writing about the transcendent function in politics. That's okay. That's human beings.
Yeah, I sent you you're already answering a question that's coming up later on, but I'll proceed. Thank you.
But Christopher, that's the nature of an interview. It's the beauty of an interview, but it's also the burden of an interview that I'm already answering question 27.
Well, at the conference last year, you said, quote, politics is great, but I'm beginning to reflect on my very long-term commitment to it, unquote. You encourage a wider appreciation of the sorry, I'm reading this. You encourage a wider appreciation and utilization of the linkage between psychotherapy and politics. You say that you are an enthusiast who can accept criticism, yet a late career reflection on what you've been doing most of your life makes you skeptical. Can you speak to the skepticism, and is there a bit of dread that you have to push through in order to present your findings and your musings?
The skepticism comes from two sources. It's not about dread. The first source is this political turn. Could it be becoming a little bit trendy?
Hmm.
You know, if you're not into politics and you don't do the political lingo, if you don't jive the politics, you're crap. You're off the pace. Nobody wants to know you. So I think I'm suspicious of people who talk their politics. Actually, by the way, don't change how they work one iota from how they were trained 25, 30 years ago. So it's a fad, perhaps, and that scares me because I don't want part of being the rebel, part of having a dose of narcissistic personality disorder as well, is that I don't want to be where the mass is. So the moment the profession goes political, I'm going to go spiritual. And the
Hmm.
moment the profession goes spiritual, I'm going to be into play. And so it goes. But that's my pathology. We're driven by these facets of our personality. And by the way, the great thing about an interview is that I can say these things. I can write them too, but it's easier when you're talking to a friend. It's much, much easier. So that's one source of the skepticism. The other is this. I'm an intellectual guy, I'm a bright boy, but I'm very insecure. I'm very insecure, especially when it comes to academics, because although I was a very successful professor, I have no degree. I went to Africa, went to prison, came back to Oxford and dropped out and started a theatre company, a political theatre company. By the way, that means I have a lot of experience about how you bring politics to a field where it's not immediately apparent that it's needed.
Hmm.
Anyway, the point I'm making is I don't have a bachelor's degree. Never mind a damn doctorate. You have a doctorate, okay? So if you say something to me like, well, it's very interesting to think about what Henri Bergson would say in relation to what you've just said, Andrew. I think I've heard the name, but I don't really know much about Bergson. And so it goes. So this has led me to be skeptical in the sense of losing confidence. Am I right? That's I'm 76 and I've been ill. That earns you the right to begin to wonder if the whole thing you've built up is about to fall down. I don't think it is, but I'm wondering about it. So that's the second source of skepticism, not dread, just inferiority in relation to the intellect, and also faddishness and not wanting to be part of the mainstream at all costs, even if it means suicide, if you see what I mean. The
Hmm.
moment everybody is agreeing with me, I'm off. Look, my friends know this. Okay, this is not something that people close to me will be thinking, what the fuck is he talking about? They know. I'm on to the next thing. It's a strength, of course, but it's also a huge problem.
By suicide, what do you intend? Do you mean literal, or are you talking about
No,
career
no, no,
suicide?
no. I mean in metaphorical suicide. Yeah,
Okay.
it would be suicide to sign this particular petition. You know, it's a term we use that I would be ruined. Okay. Anyway, those are the kind of things I had in mind with skepticism.
Did it feel like suicide, signing the open letter, or
No, 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 you've got it the wrong way around, man. It would have been suicide to refuse to sign the open letter.
how so?
Well, because I mean, I created the open letter, so this doesn't quite apply. But say you had, and then you said, Andrew, here it is, mate, just sign it. And I'm saying, oh, no, I don't want to be associated with something that might look like it's attacking Jung and demanding an apology from Jung. And no, I don't want to do it. That would be suicidal.
Hmm.
Let's
It's
see
in,
whether people hearing and reading this get what I'm talking about.
all right. I find your writings often provide explanations of, of your questions and your concerns with, not so much elaboration on possible resolutions. you provide more of the challenges often. And you also say, I love starting small organizations. And it's made me question, it's, it says, I mean, it's as though you like to smart, start small but significant fires. So what motivates you to cover a myriad of topics in your writings? And often it's kind of
Yeah.
circumambulatory throughout your books, but rather than hunkering down on a few specific topics more comprehensively.
In the best sense, I'm a superficial person. That means I'm interested in the surface. And postmodern thinking has taught us that depth is often hidden on the surface. Where was the purloined letter in Edgar Allan Poe's short story, which was the key to the story? It was on the mantelpiece, where it should have been. Everything I write is a
Hmm.
kind of celebration of the surface. This comes to some extent from Judaism. It comes, believe it or not, from an exposure some years ago to Shinto, a Japanese religion, where things are very evanescent, they shift. So I am a superficial person. However, I have learned over the years, and you have to be a very smart superficial person to get this, deep people are not always to be trusted.
Hmm.
And the presenting as a deep person doesn't mean that that individual comprehends much. And in the paper I'm writing for the next conference I'm speaking at, I'm taking a big swipe at academics, not Jungians, but at academics who are very powerful, who don't like the idea of the individual. We're all in context, we're all in systems, we're all in societies. Well, it's not wrong, but it's actually dished. That means, sorry, that's English slang. It's damaged the prospects for a role for individuals. Anyway, I'm glad you challenged me on it. I don't feel ashamed about it. But I do think I, I do think it would be nice if it's too late now for me to have done a really in-depth thing. But I did in some ways about Jung and anti-Semitism, because if you look at the political psyche, it's a huge book. It could have been 3 books. The Jung and anti-Semitism could have been 1 book if it was expanded. The 2 huge chapters on the father and the one on men could also have been a book. So I don't know, why did I do that? I have no idea. I think I do know why. I had children throughout much of my writing career, and they just get in the way. So I thought if I didn't put it all in 1 book, some child will come along and it'll screw it up. No, you think I'm joking. I'm not joking.
I'm so sorry to laugh then.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
That is the consideration for parents. I have no children, so I
Yeah.
don't have that burden.
Well, there's a big problem for analysts who want to write, which Bion wrote about. Was it in the preface or introduction to Learning from Experience? He said, I'm sorry if this is all over the place, but I'm an analyst. And as any analyst knows, I have other things to do than write. And it's quite
Yeah,
important. Yeah.
yeah. Well, with Beyond, you often wish he did things in smaller,
Yeah. Yeah.
smaller
Okay.
chunks.
Um, the term to apply to me is a bricoleur, which means someone who takes something from here, something from there, a little bit of Freud, a little bit of Winnicott, a little bit of Hillman, a little bit of Jung, a little bit of you on one occasion. Okay. So, yeah, I don't think superficial means trivial. That's the end of my answer.
That's important. Well, what does superficial mean?
Well, when we come to talk about spirituality, I will be reprising some of these ideas. Shall we wait till then?
If you'd like.
Yeah, I would like.
Okay. Well, a family member of mine, switching the topic a little, recently shared a link to an online recording that included a conversation between 2 white American females who denounced much of the environmentalist agenda, They argued that environmental policies are fraudulent and go against God's design for nature because God controls the sun, and the sun is largely responsible for the climate. Therefore, these policies are a sham, they say. What would be your end to such a apparently foreclosed discussion about environment and human agency?
I thought, because you very kindly sent me that question ahead, I thought what I'd do is say, imagine this is a patient or a client who says that to me, and I know that they're wrong,
Hmm.
and therefore I know I'm right. That already takes you into a problematic clinical discussion. Now, I am all in favor of discussing, and I use the word deliberately, politics in the clinical session. But you have to know what you're doing. When I was starting to train, we were told you don't discuss, you don't educate, you don't reassure or comfort, you just analyze. Well, it sounds good, but it's not what actually happens. Even in the Society of Analytical Psychology, which owns the JAP, the Journal of Analytical Psychology, where this will be published. Anyway, what I'm trying to say, I'm not actually sure what I'm trying to say. Ask another question. No, don't. I can get back to this.
Thank you.
Um, I wrote a paper. It's actually my best paper ever about what to do when a patient or client brings political material into the session. Now, somebody is saying this is all to do with God, so why are we bothering with environmental policies? That's political material. And I wouldn't know instantly how to deal with it, and nor would you, nor would any of us. We've not been trained. There are very few books about how to handle this material. Lots of books about how to handle aggressive patients or sexual material or spiritual dilemmas. But politics, we would like to do it, but we don't really have any guidelines how to do it. So I said the first thing to do in this paper is ask the person where this viewpoint originated. Hey, that's interesting. How long have you thought this? And where did you get this idea from? Because you obviously know, I'm talking now as if I'm in a session. You obviously know I don't agree with you, but I am very interested, curious even. Where does that start with you? And how important is it to you now? And how do you get from that to being so hostile to the environmentalists? Is there something else about them you don't like?
Hmm.
You see what I mean? You have to fashion a modus operandi in an area where we are still lacking one. And that's what I'd like to do. And when I'm supervising, I use exactly the same method. I try to put into words what I think the therapist might say. Now, it's quite possible that your family friend, if she were my patient or client, would say, I'm not answering when I first started this. This was a revelation from above. I know, I've always known. And then you're in trouble. But she might say, I had a teacher, and the teacher put this idea in a class one day about 25 years ago, and I've stuck with it ever since. I think it's really, really important. And then
Hmm.
you start to say, who was the teacher? Where were you? Etc., etc. In other words, you don't do anything terribly different from what a good therapist does. You get into the stuff. You don't get frightened because it's politics, not relationships. So that's my partial answer. And listen, it's an interview. I When we do the printed version, we'll stick the paper in the references. It was in a book. I'm trying to see if it's up there. No, I can't see it quickly. It was in a psychoanalytic book on psychoanalysis and society. And I ended up giving them this paper about what clinicians should do, and they put it first paper in the book.
I would really like to read it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I
And
appreciate that.
you can have the actual text.
So I'd love that.
Okay, I'll just make a note.
And just to clear my relative, that's not their point of view. They're not, they're they're very spiritual. They're Christian, but that's not. They have more concern about the environment than thinking that it's just in God's hands, that we have a role to play as well. Uh,
Well, yeah, but you know something? Patient has a right to be wrong.
yes, yes.
Also, it's possible that this patient, client, I'm just creating her, may think, well, I know Dr. Samuels is not going to like this. Great. I'm going to wind him up. I'm going to make him have a heart attack listening to this. In other words, the whole thing may be part of a angry, aggressive transference situation. Because
Hmm.
although I do the political stuff, I've never lost sight of psychoanalysis. So why is that? Why is this patient coming in and saying this? Another possible angle is this patient has these views and people are shitting on her. So she needs something from me, which, while not doing a vanilla agreement, at least treats her stupidity respectfully. So there's lots of different things you can do. No need to give up in despair and go home. There's a lot you can do.
Yes. Clearly and often, we denounce the behaviors and attitudes that evoke racism on systemic and interpersonal levels, and I thank you for that. You are one who initiated, I guess you are the one who initiated the open letter from a group of Jungians on the question of Jung's writings on and theories about Africans, which was published in 2018 in the British Journal of Psychotherapy. Uh, I find it in your highly recommended book, Reflecting Critically on the Political Psyche from this year, it appears that you use race in varying ways. On one hand, the term race is used as an identifier of the disavowed other. On the other hand, race is used to indicate more along the traditional lines, but like a biological factor along with sex. That's on page 82. And on page 169, you mark the word race in quotations, much as I would do. In Jungian Reflections on Systemic Racism, which was published last year, which I co-edited with Tiffany Hawk, I write that the maintenance of race theory in the medical field, including psychoanalysis, is a wizard that is utilized to passively yet violently subjugate the marginalized. I would imagine that you would agree. Where might readers locate your stance in the matter of race as a science, if you have singled out the areas of race science in any of your writings and talks?
First of all, let me say how honored I was that you and Tiffany asked me to endorse the book. It's a great book. It's a very important book. And I returned the favor because Tiffany is one of the endorsers of my new book. Sorry, I didn't ask you.
No, no, that's okay. That's okay. Writer's
Now,
choice.
yeah, but it's a very good way into this. Um, I'm not very proficient in the issues you raised, the confusions, the different epistemologies, the different segments of scientific and sociocultural thinking. I mean, I didn't understand what you asked, but I don't do that. I'm just not that good at that. But I am good at, as I've tried to say, at fighting. Let me give you an example. That open letter on human Africans was published in 10 further psychoanalytic journals, including the JAP. The shit I had to take, I'm not going to say exactly from where, but I heard that people in the IAP were dismayed that I washed our dirty linen in public. As if this letter, which could be published in the British Journal of Psychotherapy, which is eclectic, not a Jungian journal, why couldn't it be published in other professional journals? However, it's not just the Jungians who are weird about race. The International Journal of Psychoanalysis was the only journal that we sent this letter to who refused to publish it. That's the flagship journal. of the International Psychoanalytic Association, if you see what I mean. So I'm good at that. I'm not so good about the biological. I mean, on the whole, I don't really think biologically about much. And I've been attacked for this, so I don't know. Race in quotes is what I usually do. If I didn't do it in sections of the book, it's careless. Make no mistake, that letter caused a lot of disturbance. It didn't ask IAAP, the International Association for Analytical Psychology, to do anything. There was a previous attempt to get something done. I learned my lesson. It's not going to do anything. You can change consciousness in the IAP, and the letter did. But it was so interesting to watch the politics of not being asked to do anything. Maybe there's a kind of Zen political approach here. No, you don't have to do anything. This is not demanding anything. It's just a letter.
Mm.
Now, I want to say something else. I have a number of Black British and African American friends, and I have learned so much from them. I included you in this, and there are many others. Well, not sorry, that's a stupid thing to say. And there are others in the United States. There are not
Some
many
of my
others.
best friends are Black.
There are only five, I think. Five. There were, for many years, we said four. Then somebody else came along and she said, but I'm an analyst too. But one of the other Black analysts said, no, she's not really an analyst. So I don't know how many there are, but there are not many. Okay?
Well,
Yeah.
there might be six of us or so right now
Okay, six
on
out
the
of
fifth.
a community of 800 or something. Give us a break. There's just not very many. And I'll tell you a story. Apparently, at the Senate of Pacifica Graduate Institute, a distinguished analyst said, I don't know what all this fuss is about, all this open letter and petitions and da 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 da. The training institutes are open to everyone.
Mm.
Hmm. Do you want to say that again? Hmm. There was an English judge, quite liberal judge, who said the law is available to and open to everyone, just like the Ritz Hotel.
Mm.
Hmm. Listen, the Jungian world has made huge steps in relation to anti-Semitism, and I'm hoping I'll get a chance to talk about that. It has made smaller steps in relation to race. Many reasons for this. Are we going to, I can't remember,
Yes.
are we going to talk about Jung and race and Jung and anti-Semitism?
I think we are.
Okay.
Let's see.
So, yeah,
Well,
we've
this
only
is
been
the
going,
section. This
we've
is
been
the
going, I think,
section.
for 45 minutes, so we should speed up.
Okay. Well, I would like to ask you some questions pertaining to psychoanalysis and spirituality.
Sure.
Uh, Having read your newest book, I understand that you embrace a closer walk with spirituality in your relatively recent years, right? An interest in profane spirituality, you say, not just the I thou kind. You also write of tikkun olam, if I'm saying that term
Tikkun,
correctly.
yeah, more or less. Tikkun olam.
Tikkun olam.
It means repair and restoration of the world.
It's a beautiful concept.
It's a Jewish, it's traditional. I didn't invent it. It's a traditional Jewish approach to society.
Yes, but you're right. You've actually introduced it to me.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Well,
So,
you've introduced things to me. You know, cultural backgrounds matter a lot. Anyway, yeah,
well,
spirituality.
It's interesting because cultural backgrounds mean a lot, but it's interesting what the barriers are to us understanding other cultures. I have a theological background. I studied, Judaism. I studied the old Bible, and yet I didn't get deep enough to understand. Uh, Say this term
Yeah,
again.
yeah, tikkun olam. But the interesting thing is, it silenced you. My immense erudition, which is in fact not erudition at all, because how could I, as a Jew and knowing a bit of Hebrew, how could I not know what it means? So this is a good now, whether it's the white man talking down to the black man, or
No.
whether or whether it's just a member of one culture talking to another, it's interesting. It never occurred to me that I know about your theological background. You have a divinity degree. I, it never occurred to me you wouldn't know, and that's very important. That's my it was a big blind spot just now. It was quite a revelatory experience hearing you say that.
Well, I mean, it was good. I love learning new concepts, especially I'm drawn to concepts of that demonstrate how interconnected we are, or that profess there's an interconnection that we are not cognizant of. So I get a little jazzed, and I was really appreciative of that. Um, but can you please speak to your conceptualization of spirit and spirituality and how it
Yes,
applies
yes.
to analytical psychology?
I'll be very brief. Think superficial. Spirituality is every day, everywhere, and capable of being an experience open to everyone. So it's in the streets, it's in what we consume, it's in our relationships, it's in the buildings, it's everywhere. It's no big deal. In the best sense, I mean this, it's no big deal. You don't have to be ordained. You don't even have to be analyzed. Okay? You, this spirituality is demotic, which kind of means democratic.
Hmm.
So that's my take. Now, where does profane come in? Oh, I just think that the therapy world, not just the Jungian world, is terrified of promiscuity, polyamory. They don't understand that the lustful experience of so-called casual sex carries an immense spiritual charge. I do workshops on this. People
Hmm.
talk about it. Back in the 70s, Erica Jong wrote about the zipless fuck. I don't know if you remember that. No. There's something about sex outside of relationship, sex as a force, that psychotherapists run away from, even though it's everywhere around us. Maybe too much. So I wrote about profane spirituality, mostly around sex, but I'm not going to take more time on this. It was also about drugs and about popular culture. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll constitute profane spirituality. And by the way, I didn't write it recently. I began um, in this 2001 book, Politics on the Couch, is where I organized an anatomy of spirituality, four different types. I'm not going to go into them, but profane was one. I'm glad you asked about profane spirit because normally I have to force that in.
Hmm.
Listen, I'm a horny guy. Does that make me not spiritual?
Well, I still don't know what spiritual means. I know
Well,
where you can
that
find it.
yeah, but Christopher, that's your problem.
Well, it doesn't have to be academically
No,
sound
but
as
I've
to what
said
it means for
it's
you.
every day. It's every day. We're in it. We live it all the time. We just have to know how to find it. But specifically, unrelated sex is a spiritual matter. That's the controversial bit. I'm not asking you to agree to this on air, okay? And I'm sure you've never had unrelated sex in your life.
Next question.
Let's move on.
You write that the transcendent function is not the panacea through which the individual and groups move from political inactivity to active political participation. Panacea might be my wording, not yours. But if spirituality has a role to play, how might spirituality assist in the decolonization of analysis and of therapy?
Well, I think it is important to decolonize therapy. I'm not sure. It sounds like it's something you consider your area. I have never thought about my ideas about spirituality being part of my projects to produce a radical psychotherapy, a progressive critical psychotherapy. That's the term, critical psychotherapy. I've always seen critical psychotherapy as a bit distant from the stuff I do on spirituality, but you're making me think. So I don't have an answer, and maybe I'll, in the references to the written version, I'll put the um, the papers and stuff I've written on critical psychotherapy, and you will not find a word on spirituality in there. That's very interesting. That's really, these interviews can often be really challenging, man.
I'm
Woof.
sorry, I don't mean to put you in a spot. This
No,
is
no,
meant to
no.
celebrate you.
It's fine. I don't know whether it doesn't matter whether it does or it doesn't. I'm 76. It's time for me to listen to people.
Okay. All right. As consultant to the Union collection at Routledge, I guess, do you say Routledge or Rutledge?
Well, both.
You must keep track on the chart changes of interest in analytical research universally. Please share what you see as the current trajectory of interest among analysts who are new to the field. In other words, where's the new in Jungian thought and where are we headed as a medical paradigm?
I'm not going to deal with the medical paradigm question. There isn't time, but it's an interesting and important one, especially worldwide health insurance preferences for different kinds of therapy. You've got all that in mind. I want to talk about what's new for us in the Jungian world. In fact, I have to do a plenary in August in Zurich on this very question. I mean, my title is something like this. What has changed? Has anything changed? Does anything need to change? Now, there are two areas that are incredibly exciting and important. It doesn't mean that all the Jungians are into those areas. In fact, by definition, what's new means that the majority are not into these things.
Hmm.
One is sexuality, and two is anti-Semitism and race. I'll do them in turn. When I started in 1974, we all knew that a number of senior analysts had sexual relations with their patients. We all knew that the colleagues in some of the societies ignored it. Gradually over time, we've come to see that boundary violations are very seriously damaging, and people who carry them out, mostly men, are best regarded as criminal perpetrators. But of course, boundary violations is not the only sexual theme that is hot these days. Homosexuality is still around in the Jungian world. People still write, well, still around as something we're not settled about. People still write as if there are reasons why somebody is homosexual. There are
Hmm.
no reasons. It's just a normal variation with huge social, cultural, and personal problems and implications. So, although homosexuality is by no means a settled matter, it's not as hot as trans. But I think what we're going to see in relation to trans, never mind court cases and court rulings and so on, is we're going to see increasingly that you can't look for causes. You're not a trans person because of your relation with your mother or your father or your perception of their relation. Just as we now know, you're not a gay man or a lesbian because of some kind of crush on your father or your mother. Back in the day, people would give papers in which patients talked about the origin of their homosexuality being found in their father's biceps in white t-shirts,
Hmm.
as if that is what makes somebody gay. The same kinds of thinking needs to be seen through in relation to trans. So sexuality is a huge, huge cutting edge. And what's important, by the way, is it's also highly political because at the heart of monogamy is possession. So monogamy is a capitalist product. Usually the man owns the wife, but it's not always, but mostly that's it. Friedrich Engels, at the end of the 19th century, said that the antagonism between husband and wife was the first class struggle. And he was serious. Okay. So it goes into the political very, very much. And it goes into the racial, by the way, because there are so few I mean, I only know about two or three in-depth studies of what biraciality means. And we've all worked with people who come from a mixture of different heritages, and we don't know what to do. Never mind our mixture of different heritages. It's a big, big issue. So personal relationships, intimate relationships are also implicated in racial and cultural debates. Now, what about Jung in relation to race? I'm not going to say much about Jung in relation to sexuality because actually I think he's quite advanced. Animus and anima and trans fit nicely together. But I am going to talk about Jung in relation to race. Was Jung a racist? Who gives a shit?
Hmm.
We should look at how racist we are, and if we think it comes from Jung, we should question it. Jung's dead. We're not. So there is a very important discussion to have. Now, here's where it goes, in my mind, off the rails. Jung is not a racist. He's just a man of his time. Everyone was like that. They say it about the anti-Semitism too. It's not true. Um, Paul Radin, who wrote the famous Trickster book and went to Eranos and was a really valued collaborator of Jung's, challenged Jung's attitudes to Africans. He wrote a book called A Primitive Man as Philosopher. Don't worry about primitive in this context. Worry about philosopher. Primitive Man as Philosopher. And in this book and in lectures around it, Radin said Professor Jung was simply out of his depth. The famous story about the Bushman hunter returning home with no food, who was frustrated and angry, and his little boy runs out to meet him, and in a fit of rage, he kills the little boy. This is a white invention. Some guy told Jung this. Jung never saw it. He never heard it from a Bushman. I don't know where he got it from. It's gone through every single edition of Psychological Types without comment. There is a problem. Jung could have done things differently. Shamdasani, Sonu Shamdasani, in his book hints he has to be careful because of his close relation to the Jungians, perhaps. But really, Jung had options. Which comes to anti-Semitism. Jung had options. He did not have to stick by what he wrote. and his post-war attempts to clean it up are, to my mind, reprehensible. Jung's body of work stands, even if he's anti-Semitic, frankly. It might make a lot of Jewish people not want to have anything to do with him. It has done. I'll tell you a story. I do a exercise in universities with doctoral and master's students in psychotherapy and depth psychology, and I ask them to do a word association test to the word Jung. Number one response, and I've got 1,200 responses now. Number one response is Freud. I say Jung, you say Freud. It tells a lot about the problems we face, that our leading competitor is the number one association when our guy's name is mentioned. Number two, Nazism, Germany, anti-Semitism, that all those things. Huge. It's huge. Now, I'm not saying Jung was an anti-Semite in the ordinary sense, but he is an anti-Semitic writer, and he's very affected by the way in which Hitler and other Nazi theorists like Stommer wrote. He is, but he had options and he didn't take them, sadly. So that association of, Jung was not a Nazi, okay, but he dabbled in it. He was interested in being a number one psychologist in Germany, and to do that you had to dabble in Nazism. Cleaning it up in 1946, phooey. Okay? I found, well, actually, I'll tell this story because I have no reason to hide it. I found through my great friend and mentor, Bill McGuire, who was the general editor of the collected works, I found a letter. Yes. And this letter is written by Jung to Mary Mellon. Now, some people will not know that Mary Mellon was the money bags behind the whole thing, behind Bollingen. Why? Well, any American knows the name Mellon. Okay, Mary was married to a Mellon, and she had a hell of a lot of dough. So she was a really important figure for Jung. So I found this in 1946, not 1936. This is after the war. You have probably heard, Jung writes, the absurd rumor that I am a Nazi. This rumor has been started by Freudian Jews in America. Their hatred of myself went as far as India, where I found falsified photos of mine, meaning of himself, in the psychological seminar of Calcutta University. Is this bonkers? It is actually, but that's what he wrote. It was a photo retouched by Calcutta University, apparently. It was a photo retouched in such a way as to make me appear as an ugly Jew with a pince-nez. That's an old-fashioned spectacle. Those photos came from Vienna. This rumor has been spread over the whole world. Even with us, it has been picked up with such alacrity that I am forced to publish all the things I've written about Germany. Now, it is, however, difficult to mention the anti-Christianism of the Jews after the horrible things that have happened in Germany. But Jews are not so damned innocent after all. The role played by the intellectual Jews in pre-war Germany would be an interesting object of investigation. 46, not 36.
The role played by pre-war Jews?
I'm not going to explain it. It would dignify it. He's saying crudely, Jews brought it on themselves, the Holocaust. No wonder serious scholars don't want to have much to do with C.G. Jung. Now, I want to go into some really shitty stuff. When I first tried to publish my work on Jung and anti-Semitism in the Journal of Analytical Psychology, I couldn't get it in. They kept turning it down. And in fact, they fully rejected it. Luckily, my friend, Dr. John Beebe in San Francisco, who was well thought of by the journal, I think actually was the co-editor at the time.
Hmm.
He worked with me he didn't change the thrust of it at all, but he got it through. Later, I had a long correspondence with a staff member who's now dead at the JAP called Jim Seddon. He was the executive editor. Well, he was called something like administrative assistant, but he was the executive editor. He was a polymathic guy, lovely man. And he was so upset at the behind the scenes machinations between Michael Fordham, Judith Hubbock, Fred Plaut, and other high ups at the journal that he photocopied it and sent it to me. I've still got it, it's all in there. And I mentioned this at Essex about this, how the journal censored me or tried to censor me on this. I was expecting someone to say a word about it. Nobody said anything.
Listen, I want to just keep talking, keep talking. Do you have time for one more
Yeah.
question?
Yes, because we've only been going probably for about an hour, a bit more than we wanted, but it's one more question that's still going to be of an adequate length for someone to sort of have a martini and listen to it.
It's definitely I have to say this.
Christopher, you were in the room when I brought all that out. And
For the
by the
first
way,
time,
and by the way, on the question of the Mary Mellon letter from Jung to Mary Mellon, the Jung estate threatened to sue me if I published it because I didn't have proper permission. I certainly didn't have proper permission. And I published it, and they never sued me. But they threatened to because they heard what I was going to do. But the JAP did not want that particular quote in. I had to fight like crazy to get it in. Now, the JAP is a progressive liberal element in the Jungian world. Think how much more resistance, evasion, dishonesty, and censorship there is in less progressive segments of our world. I was told that publishing the open letter would alienate potential funders. Do I sound angry like I have a chip on my shoulder? Yeah, I am angry.
something's unresolved.
I haven't done the same detailed research in relation to race, but I know I have done some, and it's published in 2 chapters in the new book that you've been very kindly plugging for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading it actually. It's not the first. I'd never read you before I met you. Well, that's not true. I actually read you for my dissertation, and you might should be quoted in my dissertation. Uh, but I never read a whole book before I met you, and I'd never read a Jungian addressing these topics in such a concentrated way. Even though you know it's there's still a wholeness to it, and I do see courage in doing that.
Well,
And
maybe I don't know. Listen, the reason for bringing all this out now in a JAP context is to make sure the JAP recognizes its little bit of deplorable history. Maybe do we have one more question or
I do, but I want to say this very quickly. Thanks to you, um, I'm sure you had some role in it, but when I brought my paper from 2021 to the JAP, initially there was pushback. We can't say these things. We've been around for so many years. We intend to be around for so many more years. Maybe down the road, this deserving conversation will happen, but not now. And I insisted if I don't publish it with the JAP, I'll publish it somewhere. Uh, I'm very grateful that they allowed me, even though it was pushback, and I had to explain why I was saying things, and it really kind of refined the writing process with the pushback. The conversation occurred between me and the editors, and it didn't feel easy, but now it feels amazingly supportive, and I'm very grateful to the journal. Um,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
very grateful to you.
yes, I'm not allowed to talk about that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know if I am either. Arthur will let us know. But here's my final question. Here's my final question. On page 82 of your newest book, you write, quote, apocalypse, I've never seen this word. I know apocalypse, but apocalypticism,
Apocalypticism.
apocalypticism is not based on the fear of an end, but rather a desire for it, unquote. That strikes me as foreboding. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. It was a chapter which was originally a paper on environmental politics. Funnily enough, what a synchronicity, given your family members' comment, which you made me comment on, and I turned it into a client or a patient. But the paper was called something like bringing green politics in from the margins. The paper's not important. You want to know about apocalypticism. Basically, my idea is that we are somehow turned on or activated by ideas of an end. Maybe we feel we deserve to end. Maybe it's a punishment. But in my opinion, it interferes with successful environmental politics because it leads to a kind of depressive anxiety. If we are all bad, humanity is all bad and has ruined themselves and ruined the planet, where's the energy for change going to come from? So I suggested a different approach to environmental politics that would bring it in more to the center. So in a way, where we're ending is actually my application of a piece of theory to a political problem, which is not what I really do very well. But I think it was pretty neat on this occasion that it's not that people are frightened of an end. It's that they almost welcome it because they feel they've had it coming.
Something to think about. It's very eerie, and I touch upon it in my dissertation as well. So I was really interested. Uh, the wording, the way you put that, is good to see a Jungian. Uh, you might not be the only one, but well, I don't see it often. That's for sure. Um, Listen, thank you very much for actually inviting me to be the one interviewing you. And it's been a very stimulating, very interesting conversation. I do not want it to end. So I thank you very much for your
Well,
time.
we can go on talking, but I think you should end the recording.
Yes. You weren't supposed to let the audience know that. No, that's good. Well, thank you, friend. And
Yeah, we are friends. It makes a difference.
yes,
Okay. So press the button.
thank you.